being here today. May I just request you to please switch off or turn your mobile phones to silent for the duration of the event. Thank you. My name is Cherry Joseph. I work in management consulting in Mumbai itself. Over the past year, I've worked closely with the ReachIvy team and Vora for my MBA applications, and I've gained immensely from the team's outstanding insights and support. Let me just go about introducing both ReachIvy and Vora. ReachIvy is a premium education advisory that helps aspiring students get accepted into top-tier education institutes globally for undergraduate, master's, and MBA programs. ReachIvy education specialists are graduates from top international institutes themselves and know the intricacies of the rigorous admission procedure and the extreme attention to detail required by a top-ranked university. Let me spend a moment introducing Vibha, who's the founder of ReachIvy. Vibha Gagzi holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and a Bachelor of Science from Carnegie Mellon University. She has also pursued courses at the University of California, Berkeley, at the London School of Economics, and Indian School of Business. Vibha is on the Executive Council of the Harvard Club in Mumbai, the Carnegie Mellon Admissions Council, and the Young Thicky Ladies Organization Committee. Her professional experience spans finance, fashion, media, and public relations. She has worked in New York in asset management and has helped a California-based hedge fund in India. She is extremely passionate about education and believes that it is the ultimate social equalizer. Vibha wishes to provide holistic guidance to young individuals who aspire to reach leading universities globally and hence established ReachIvy. Well, that of course is Vibha's stellar credentials on paper. As a person, Vibha is one of the most astute and blatantly honest mentors I've ever come across. With a sharp understanding of the admission process, exceptional attention to detail, and amazing sense of humor, Vibha and the ReachIvy team undoubtedly got the best out of me during the application process.
So on my left is Smriti Mathur. Smriti received her MBA from ACR and graduated cum laude with a Bachelor of Arts from Franklin and Marshall College. Smriti is a partner at Catalyst Growth Partners, a financial and strategy advisory practice. She was previously with Actis, the largest emerging markets private equity investing fund. She's also worked with Khosla Impact Fund, Aves Capital, and Goldman Sachs. She currently sits on the board and executive committee of the INSEAD Alumni Association and is spearheading the INSEAD Business Lab in India. Smriti, thanks so much for joining us. At Cambridge, Rachita was the co-president of the Women in Leadership Society and was on the executive board of Aid Education International and GBS Beyond Profit Special Interest Group. Rachita, thanks a lot for being with us this afternoon. And then we have Gayatri Pahlajani. Gayatri graduated with an MSc in Gender and Media from the London School of Economics in 2005. She's also been with AC Nielsen and MTV in the past, and she also launched her own company in 2009 called The Big Sneeze. It provides creative media services, and she has a portfolio spanning writing, voice, sound, and filmmaking. Gayatri has also written 3 commissioned books, including a national bestseller, with 2 more set to be written this year. She's also the current executive secretary of the LSE Alumni Association here in Mumbai. Gayatri, thank you so much for being with us. Okay, so let's go a little bit into your childhoods and give us a sense of what it was growing up, a sense of your families, your parents, the culture they inculcated, whether it was more academically bent or more co-curricular bent. Just give us a sense of your early years.
Vibha, thanks for having us. So, whenever people ask me where I grew up, it's always a bit of a difficult question because we moved around a lot. My dad's sort of, job was the kind where we moved around within India a lot, and then, we moved to Vietnam and Singapore, and then China and the US and Africa, etc. But one of the things that I sort of did as we moved around was just, it assimilated me to a lot of new people, new cultures. As disruptive as it was, it also sort of, gave me a sense of, being more sort of open-minded. It helps you sort of be more adaptive. in terms of sort of academics versus extra sort of curriculars, I did a bunch of different things, from some elocution, a little bit of dance, a little bit of music. But really, because we moved around so much, I think my parents were just focused on making sure I stayed, academically at level with, my peer groups. So there was, a strong focus on academics versus other subjects.
I grew up in Mumbai. I studied at JB, so I've basically been a Bombay girl the whole way through. For me, I think for my parents, education and grades always mattered. But I think thankfully for them, I've always been a bit of a nerd. So, so they didn't have to worry too much about my grades. And I think what they did really well actually is a focus on extracurricular activities. From the time that I was a kid, I was, I studied Kathak, I studied ballet, I took badminton classes, I think I even went for a karate class. So I literally did anything and everything. And it wasn't so much to build my CV as much as it was just to see what I was interested in, see what I had an aptitude for. And thanks to that, I discovered my love for squash, which I then played professionally for a while and represented both India and Yale.
Okay, basically with regard to how I grew up, I think essentially I'm more or less basically almost been a Bombay girl for most of my life, barring maybe a year or two of primary school in England. In terms of extracurriculars that I took up, I did Bharatnatyam, and I listed a lot of complaints from my neighbor on the 9th floor. My dad tried to push me into squash and it didn't work out. But by and large, I definitely was academically oriented, and I did try to work as hard as possible. I was also a voracious reader, so that is something that I still do, hopefully, to this day. It wasn't so much about pressure as far as I was concerned, because my parents are very easygoing and they're very do what you want, whatever makes you happy. That was always essential. But both of them, it's very difficult not to get influence with people around you, and both of them had an extremely strong work ethic, which they still do to this day. So they work very hard. So I know that I look at them and say, okay, I have to work very hard. So I think that was important, because I think in that sense we both share the Indian mindset where hard work is also appreciated. Secondly, I grew up at a time where we were just moving into taking our careers very seriously, at least in terms of the fact that it defined us more when I was growing up. So it became, we started asking questions about, do I really have to do what everybody else is doing? Does this really make me happy? So I got influenced as well, which is why my master's was a little different from a lot of other people's, because I was influenced by asking questions about, does this make me happy? Is this really what I want to do? And it's very hard not to get swept up in the tide when you are doing that, when you're asking people around you, asking those questions, those conversations are happening, which is why I got influenced as well.
What prompted you towards your graduate degrees, having spent time in the US for both of you, and you were at HR college here in Bombay? Yeah. How did that next sort of chapter in your life start?
So, I'd been working for about sort of 7 years or so when I decided I wanted to do my MBA. And it wasn't an obvious choice. So when you do finance, a lot of people, you'll have as many people tell you get an MBA as people say, there's absolutely no point in doing an MBA. I think a lot of this, a lot of people just do it sort of for the credibility. And I think certainly if you're in India, it helps to have an MBA degree. But I think it has to be a little bit more, because at the end of the day, it's 1 or 2 years of your life. It's an opportunity cost. And so there has to be some personal growth, I think, element associated with it. For me, it was just a chance to take a year out after working for a few years to reflect on sort of my career and my personal life and see what I wanted to do. It was an opportunity to meet a lot of people, an opportunity to go out of India again, an opportunity to be in Europe, which I hadn't had the opportunity to live in before. As well as it opened up a networking channel for me that I didn't have. So having not studied in India, I thought it would be good to get a sort of business school degree that had a lot of alumni who were India-based, and would just open up a new channel for me. So.
When I decided to apply for my MBA, I had about 5 to 6 years of work ex, but I was a history major at Yale, which meant that I had very few hard skills, which I realized when I was working, and I felt that I'd reached a stage in my career where those kind of hard skills would actually do me a great deal of good. So that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to do an MBA. I wanted to learn some of those skills. I think, the point that Smriti, you brought up about it just adding a lot of credibility to be perfectly honest, I also just did it for my CV. My background is in development, so I've done a lot of work in sort of socioeconomic development. And I thought that having an MBA, and I've already actually seen the benefits of it, would kind of, well, one, give me a market value of sorts, but I would say also second, just give me more credibility if I'm working in the business world, and then people see that my background has been in an NGO or in sort of the development space.
So we actually have some people in the audience from the development space. I just wanted to push back on your point. Did you consider the MPA or the MPP, and then how did the MBA weigh in over the other two?
Yeah, I always knew I would get a graduate degree, and actually it's funny because up until the fall before I would apply to go to get my graduate degree, I was all set on doing an MPA or a Master's in Development Studies. In fact, I'd done all the research, I had all the schools down. I said, okay, this is the date that I'm going to go and sit for my GRE. What I realized, the thing with doing an MPA or a Development Studies graduate degree is it kind of then slots you in to that field, and then that doesn't allow you that much leeway to move in between the private and the public sector. Whereas with an MBA, you have a guaranteed set of hard skills that can be applied across sectors. And I found that to be a really compelling reason for me to do the MBA. And as I said, I love to study, so who knows, I might get that MPA at a later point.
Media is essentially a very tricky thing to do a master's in, because you don't necessarily need it. You're doing an MBA for a particular reason or an MS for a particular reason, but career development, career growth can happen without an MBA as well. There are lots of people who've come in straight from, directly from undergrad. They've gone on to run successful media companies extremely well. But for me, it was very important to kind of combine talent with a little bit of backing, kind of like a amalgamation between form and function, as it were. So I wanted to get a little bit of understanding of global media trends, how media was theorized, how people thought about media all over the world. And I did want to do it at a very accredited university, which is why I chose the London School of Economics. So it was a combination of obviously improving my, worth in the job market, which is why I chose LSE, but also, like I said, adding a little more function to my form.
Can you, for the audience who might be conflicted between the geographies, just share your highlights from the three experiences and how the systems differ from one another?
Yeah, so I studied in India till about the 8th standard, and then we moved to both sort of Vietnam and Singapore. So I finished sort of high school with the International Baccalaureate system. To me, and then sort of went undergrad in the US, and then of course MBA at INSEAD in Europe. The big difference, of course, was really when I did the IB, coming from the Indian system. And it just sort of opened my mind, because suddenly it wasn't, about what to think, but about how to think. And there was a lot of emphasis on, beyond sort of the academics, the caste system that the IB has, and put so much emphasis on it. So the first time I sort of did social work in Singapore, not in India, quite ironically. And, creativity and all of that, became an integral sort of part of my curriculum. And, I wouldn't be able to have passed it. I then did sort of liberal arts in the US, which is quite similar in many ways to the IB. But I think the liberal arts in particular, we have something like 32 courses, of which your major only constitutes, it's either 12 or 16. And so the remaining sort of, 16, 20 odd courses, you can take any electives. And I took classes like African dance, with the art of making movies, anthropology classes. If you wanted, you could do a class on Islam or Hinduism. And that was, again, just sort of really refreshing, because as someone in your sort of 18, 19, it allowed you to explore different things, and they were taken as seriously as classes like financial accounting or sort of macroeconomics. So I thought that was sort of great. INSEAD is very similar to the US system, just because in many ways it sort of takes from the Harvard Business School sort of playbook, and was founded by somebody who went to HBS, and a majority of courses do tend to be HBS. But the only sort of difference that I know just from friends who've sort of pursued MBA in the US versus Europe is that INSEAD puts a lot of emphasis on what you do outside the classroom. So there's the social element, the networking element, the clubs, the groups are a really sort of integral part of the experience. And non-grade disclosure is something that's sort of valued quite highly at INSEAD, because the idea is get out of the classroom and go and meet people, go talk to people, because that's an integral part of the learning.
I think there are so many differences. We can be here all evening about sort of the different educational systems, but I would just like to focus a little bit on, on how each educational system views what learning is. I think in India, and many of us have been products of, Indian educational institutions, learning is equated with grades, with doing well. And typically what ends up happening is what you learn in the classroom is very much aligned with what's going to get you that 90%. When I went to the US, actually, the experience you were talking about with IB in Singapore, when I went to the US and I was a freshman at Yale, it occurred to me how many gaps there were in my education, because I had a lot of content, but I didn't have a lot of tools or raw material for how to process that content on my own. Freshman year, I was with another friend of mine from Mumbai. We were taking Writing 101. And the first assignment that we had was this article that was about half a page long. And we had to write a 5-page paper on it. And none of us knew where to begin. We said the author of the article couldn't write more than half a page, and you want us to write 5 pages about what we feel about it. And I think that, in that moment was when I realized what a valuable education I was about to have for the next 4 years. And that's really what the US education system does. I think it gives you those tools of how to think. It prods you to develop your own opinions, to be, to not be afraid to be original and independent thinking. So I think that was a major difference. And in terms of the UK, I would say that, the Indian system, I think structurally is very much based on the UK system. But I think the attitude towards learning is very much in the UK, kind of the onus is on the learner, on the student. So for instance, this may not be so true for an MBA program, but certainly for masters, you could have 8 hours of class in a week, and then the rest of the time is up to you. And you can choose to be as productive as you want and, be a research assistant for a professor, or take additional classes that you're not going to get credit for, or you can spend all that time in the pub. It doesn't really matter. It's, it's sort of that onus is on you. Whereas in the US, I found that they're very eager to lay everything out on a platter for you, to make it as easy as it is for you to learn, and to give you all those opportunities up front.
Gayatri, you went to the UK to do a master's, and traditionally we have a sense that the US is more liberal, and if you want to learn about media, you'd go to the US. So how did you make that distinction and then the choice to go to the UK?
I think the UK approach to media was also liberal, and like you're saying, universal. There was no real difference I found where that was concerned. But it was a bunch of things. It was very important because at LSE there were diverse academics working on very interesting thought strains from all over the place, and they were doing a lot of media across studying media across a lot of countries and different media systems around the world, including China, including Africa. It was fascinating. And it was important for me. It was also important for me to get that 1 year away from the job market, which was for me better than doing a 2-year course. So it was the practicalities of it as well, which is why I chose the place I went to.
I just like to get a sense of picking the right college. We all hear about the diversity at these colleges. We hear about finding the right fit. I don't know how many people have heard this. Find the college with the right fit. How did you guys figure out which college you wanted to go to, and was it the right fit for you in hindsight?
So, when I sort of went about the process of sort of, doing business school, I actually only applied to 2 schools, London Business School and INSEAD. And I was quite clear I wanted to do Europe. One of the reasons was just, for a couple of reasons. A, hadn't lived in Europe, closer home. They had shorter courses. The INSEAD course being 1 year to me was sort of quite appealing. Greater diversity, which is something I was sort of seeking, having lived in India for 3-4 years before I did that. And I think, when I spoke to people sort of who had been to INSEAD and had been to sort of, other schools, I just found this irrational passion for their schools. And people, you talk to an INSEAD person about it and they can go on and on forever. And to me, that was sort of quite appealing. It seemed like sort of a great experience. And I think finally, what made the decision for me between LBS and INSEAD was really, that INSEAD had a shorter course at 1 year. And, the 1 year sort of, it's an accelerated MBA program. So really you cover 80% of what a 2-year program covers, but you sort of do it in a 10-month span. So it's a fairly quick pace, which is why the average age tends to be a little older than I think most sort of US business schools. And so you have to be, I think, confident that you can keep up to the pace of it. I'd worked long enough, and I think the kind of job that I did, with sort of private equity, we get a little bit of exposure into a bunch of different business verticals, made me confident that I felt that a 1-year course would probably be more beneficial to me. than a 2-year course.
Since I decided to not do the development, the masters, and I was doing an MBA, which tends to be more about breadth than about depth. I felt that okay, I'll do a highly condensed 10-month course, and I'll be done within a year, and that's great. The other thing is, because I shifted from wanting to do a master's, in development to an MBA, I wanted to make sure that I went to a school that had a very strong kind of beyond profit or social enterprise track, and Cambridge had that for me, and it sounded very exciting. So that was another reason. Smriti spoke a little bit about the age, and I think that's actually an important one. At least it was for me. I was recently engaged, and my fiance at the time was going to be in London, and I knew that I would be spending weekends away from campus, and I wanted to make sure that I was at a school where the age group, where people were kind of at a similar stage in their lives as I was, because MBAs are a lot of hard work, but there are a lot of partying as well. And there are schools that are known for, having this really, really great social life outside of classes, which if you missed, you're really missing an integral part of the MBA experience. And I wanted to make sure that if I had that kind of balance between, sort of going to London or being at Cambridge, I wouldn't feel like I was missing out on an integral part of that 1 year. I really, really wanted to be in a business school that was within a larger university. What I missed most about Yale, I wanted to kind of recreate through my graduate school experience, and Cambridge certainly allowed me to do that.
It was very important for me to get to apply to a college which would open doors for me once I would get back here, and it does. As an entrepreneur doing what I do, when I do mention that I'm from LSU, when I send my CV across for potential clients that I want to meet, it's far easier for me to get access than I would have originally thought, I think, without one. Reputability is attached to that. It was extremely important for me to get to a college which was highly reputable. And I did very much like the course that I did. It was an MSc in gender and the media. It was located in, I had access to both the gender departments as well as the media departments, and I could access all kinds of areas of feminist media studies and thoughts related to that. So it was very intellectually interesting as well as challenging. And like Rachita mentioned, and I kind of agree with her, the school that I went to didn't really think so much about profitability and the bottom line as it tried to understand the social impact of what it did. And I think that was extremely interesting and important for me to be a part of. And like Smriti, who applied to 2 schools, I applied to only one. I didn't have a safety school, so it was either LSE or bust, unfortunately.
We want to get a sense of the classroom. What is this amazing classroom that all these schools talk about? They talk about diversity. They attract people from different backgrounds. Give us some sense, true tangible sense of what your classroom looked like at each of your schools.
I think a true INSEAD day has to be classroom and outside the classroom. So I want to give you a typical day at INSEAD rather than just the classroom, because only part of sort of the learning and the experience really happens in the classroom, at least at INSEAD. I think one of the biggest challenges in INSEAD is just that, because it's an accelerated program, there's just a lot to absorb. So managing time management, managing how to balance everything and absorb everything you want to do is really one of the most difficult things. Your classes, I think, most MBA classes, I think, are similar, I think, across the board. So you have all the way from dynamic pricing and revenue management type classes to statistics to, finance, org behavior, etc. But, what happens outside the class and how they sort of put the classes together are really interesting. So you have, and I think again, the kind of study groups they put together, which is 4 or 5 people who are incredibly different and diverse, and they try and put you in groups of people that you don't typically sort of work with and see that sort of challenge. And they test you on that challenge. So it's not just working on case studies together. For example, one of our classes, we had, I think this was an org behavior class, where we had an egg, and we had some, they gave us an egg, a couple of pieces of paper, some string, and some sticks, and they said, okay, you're gonna have to make a parachute or something. You have to drop this egg from 20 feet, and this is all you have. You have 1 hour, drop it from 20 feet and make sure it doesn't break, okay? Nobody in our group was an engineer. We had people who were consultants. There was, private equity. We had people who'd worked in industry and, etc. How do you go about doing this. But most of us actually managed. I think I think something like 70% of us managed to put something together that didn't break, and it was sort of quite thrilling. This whole sort of bonding experience of doing that, and that's sort of that's sort of part class, part outside class. There'll be things like an energy talk by a BCG sort of partner in the evening you want to sort of perhaps attend and think about. Maybe that's a field you want to go into. You might engage 2 or 3 friends and ask them, what job did you do, and try and see if that's something that you maybe want to pursue after your MBA. There's a lot of club activity. So there's all sorts of clubs again that you can be sort of part of, and that are doing a whole bunch of stuff. And then at the end of the day, there's a social element that's a really, again, big part of it. So it could be from catching dinner with your friends or a movie, to there's always some big sort of social event on National Week, which is a celebration. We do this celebration of 5 or 6 sort of countries and cultures throughout the course of the year, which is like a week-long exercise. So going and sort of tasting food from a different country, or watching a show that that particular country has put together. So and this is one day, right? And every day sort of tends to be like this. So it tends to be fairly packed. And I think really the challenge is to understand, and which is what Vibha was saying, understand what you're looking for from the MBA before you get there, because it's very overwhelming. There's a lot to do, and there just isn't sort of enough time to take it all in.
I actually found it there. We had a guy who had been a ballet dancer for 9 years and was looking to make a switch in his career. We had a chef, we had musicians, we had a lot of people from the development background as well. We had an athlete. So it was a really, really interesting mix of people to put together in one classroom and kind of see what comes out of it. And because you have so much project work and so many opportunities to engage with one another outside of the classroom, it actually makes for really, really interesting conversation, and I would say really memorable experiences overall. In terms of what a day looked like, I would say a day at Cambridge kind of would very much mirror what a day at INSEAD would look like. Again, it was a 10-month program. It was incredibly packed. We had 8 hours of class a day, which is intense. But the nice thing about Cambridge is that because you're part of a larger university, you can kind of, when you're done with the day, you can step aside and you can do something different. And what I really enjoyed about Cambridge was when you study there, you're part of an 800-year-old history. And we would have, Cambridge has about 32 colleges, and each college has its dining halls. And so each dining hall has something called formal dinner. It's very pretentious. You wear, you wear these black capes that you see in Harry Potter, and you invite your friends, and you have this nice 5-course meal with port wine and everything. But that was, that was a fun experience. That was part of being at Cambridge, and we got to do a lot of those kinds of things, which I think was a nice break from financial accounting and so on and so forth.
So what really struck me is how the environment that I was doing, the classes that I was doing, how collaborative it was. I thought it would be very cutthroat. I thought everybody would be after everybody else. I thought it would just be this mad dash to the finish line. But I was surprised by how mature and collaborative and helpful people were when we were working together, when we were working on papers. I found that quite a surprise, a pleasant one at that. I was also surprised that what we take for granted, which is our command over English, is that other people are at a distinct disadvantage. Which is not to say that we take advantage of that disadvantage, but I do remember my friends from Italy struggling with basic sentence construction, and they wrote their papers in Italian, then they translated them into English, and it was double the work, and the amount of work that they had to do, I said, I take this for granted, so that is, it was, again, something very, very interesting. A typical day, like I was telling Vibha the other day, it's kind of deceptively light, the course structure, at least at LSE. They'll give you your schedule. They'll give you your list of readings. But what you make of it? How many readings do you want to do per paper? How intricate do you want to make your content when you're writing your essay? That's really up to you. Obviously, it would reflect on your grade. But there was kind of this balance between structure and lack of structure that I found in a way hard, because I came from a system that I was told what to do. And now I apparently have all this freedom that I don't know what to do with. So I tried to use my powers for good when I was there. So let's see how that goes.
At Cambridge, the MBA is actually, I think, one of the smallest ones. It's about 150 people. So think about all the diversity and the fact that it's really just 150 people graduating at the end of the year. So by the end of the year, we really had an opportunity to work closely with and get to know people from across the world and across different backgrounds as well, which was really enriching actually.
Talk about INSEAD, Cambridge or LSE, your favorite class or professor at your school.
My favorite class actually is surprising. If you'd asked me this before I went to INSEAD, I would have said no way in hell. It's a class called Uncertainty and Data Judgment, which is basically a statistics class, right? It's as dry as it gets, you would think, but we just had the most incredible professor who just sort of made the content so interesting. So really the course is really about how do you think about uncertainty and framework for thinking of problems given uncertainty, and you do statistics, etc., to try and sort of come at the answer, right? We had this great sort of prof who basically turned the class into a gambling class. And so, she would sort of put questions up, ask us, how many people in this class do you think have, the same birthdays, etc. And, she was effectively the house, and you were betting against the house. Needless to say, and the way the bet worked was that if she won, we had to, the person, we had to give her money. And like a thing, and if we won, she would give us money. And so, that was just sort of opened my mind, I think, the importance of statistics in a really sort of interesting, different way. And, it was not just about statistics, it was about, she challenged us to sort of take risks, as she says, make space for surprises. You never know what's going to come next. So, and I think, again, to me, that was, again, part of the whole experience, because I think previously, I was very much, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to do next, and this is what I'm going to do next. And I think INSEAD really challenged me to, think about what do you want to do, why do you want to do it, take some risks in life, maybe it'll be rewarding. And if you don't take risks, you'll never be pleasantly surprised.
My favorite class, I would say, so there's a gentleman called Lord Dennis Stevenson in the UK who's very closely associated with Cambridge. And Cambridge had this amazing kind of series of talks, or really a class with this guy who would come in every Friday, and he would, he's been on the board, he's been the chairman of the board of the MoMA in New York and the Tate Modern in London. He's very well connected and very successful. And he would bring in 3 of his super successful friends, and he would give them the following brief. He would say, you're on your deathbed, you're 90-something years old, and your son or your daughter is standing there, and you have about 20 minutes to live. What is the wisdom that you're going to give them? And now I want you to give this to my class, And it was actually, it was really impersonal, because it wasn't so much this lecture style. We'd actually have a conversation with these people, and it was 3 new people every time throughout the year. And we had people like the head of Cadbury, and then we had people who ran smaller businesses, and it was really interesting to see leaders in their own professions with such different takes on what leadership is all about, and what success is all about. And for me, I would say that, of course, I learned a lot of hard skills and all of that, and I enjoyed all of that a lot, but this was really, really something else for me.
I don't know if I can call it like a favorite professor or class per se, because I think everybody had a lot of different ideas that, in their own forms were. But I'd like to think that I liked the 2 C's at LSE. One was critique, and the other was constructionism. Constructionism in the sense that the ideas that, the rules of society, the idea of masculinity or the idea of femininity are all just things that we have socially constructed. That was fascinating, because again, like proficiency with English, I took that for granted. Second was the idea of critique, that I could take any professor's paper or any school of thought and say that you're wrong. That was something that I wasn't exposed to, because for me, it was not only a leap from the Indian system to the UK system, it was a leap from commerce to humanities. And it was almost like a double whammy, where I had to completely unlearn and then relearn. So for me, it was quite a leap for me to make. But these are the 2 things that really stuck in my mind.
What kind of support does the alumni provide to students, and what kind of support have you as students provided back to the alumni?
I think the best way I can sort of illustrate this is just to talk about how it sort of helped me, not sort of as somebody on the association board, but just as a regular sort of alumni. So, in India, we have sort of a fairly active alumni. I think we have 700 or so sort of alumni in India, and we're quite active in Mumbai and Delhi, and 5 or 6 chapters around. About 5 or 6 months ago, I set up my own sort of advisory business, really sort of working with startups. And again, this sort of came about from, the whole INSEAD sort of soul searching, trying to, in terms of what I wanted to do. I couldn't have done this had I not gone to INSEAD, and I couldn't have done this without the alumni network. It helped me in multiple ways. One, my business partner is a friend who I made at INSEAD. It couldn't have happened without him. Two, as we went about the idea and we tried to think of, does this make sense? The amount of time people in the community, the alumni community, took out for us to sit with us, walk through our business plans, connect us with people, just freely opened up their Rolodexes. And continue to be sort of guides and mentors to us. So we found clients through the alumni network. We found employees through the alumni network. Some of our current and sort of clients continue to be from INSEAD. We continue to get referrals, and so to me, I couldn't have done. We certainly couldn't have ever formed this advisory business, and I don't think we would have reached the success that we have had the alumni network just in India not been as strong as it is.
I reached out to a few alumni while I was still at Cambridge. It wasn't really for a job or advice on, on a business that I wanted to set up. It was mostly I was interested in organizations that they had been associated with, and I wanted to just talk to them about that. And they were, it's generally my experience was that it was, they were extremely accessible. And the school also facilitated a lot of those conversations if need be. In India, to be perfectly honest, I haven't been too involved with the alumni group. I know there is a Cambridge Society of Bombay, and the nice thing about, again, being at a business school that's within a larger university is that you have access to anyone who went to Cambridge, not just people who went to the Judge Business School. So we have a society. It is fairly active, but I've never reached out to alumni here for anything, so I can't really speak to that.
Well, I'm on the alumni committee. So what I do find is that at this moment we're just about starting to get things together. Actually, it's been about 2 years, so we're in the process of getting things together. So we have all these talks and lectures by either LSE alumni, visiting professors. So we kind of tap, the LSE base to get them to come down and talk to them. Then we have these also jointly with other universities. So kind of to find a way for our network to grow, for our exchange to grow. I haven't particularly really tapped the alumni network for my own benefit because I'm doing it from the other end. But like I said, the LSE name for me in my business professionally has opened a lot of doors. And when like I said, when I do send them my company profile, my profile with it, it helps me immensely.
Can you just share for the audience benefit the kind of events and the programming that you guys have hosted as part of the LSE club here?
The thing with LSE is that you're open to multiple disciplines. It's not just the course that you did. So you get people from the accounting and finance course, the management course and stuff. So it's very interesting just to interact with LSE networks alone. But we also have, for example, we have visiting professors. So we had Dr. Nirmalya Kumar, who hosted a lecture on brand breakout, extremely prolific and extremely known for what he does. We also had Dr. Piepenbrock, who did something on business architecture, which was extremely interesting as a non-business student, and I found it incredibly fascinating. So and we also had professionals. So we had Nasir Manji, who spoke to us about infrastructure, and Zia Modi, who of course is your every woman really, from women in business to the legal profession. So we have these kinds of exchanges on the committee.
Can I just add, as a shameless plug, because this is, I sit on the association, I spend a lot of time actually putting events together, so I'm going to do a shameless plug for all the stuff that we do. One of the things we've sort of tried to do the last sort of 2 or 3 years is very similar to sort of LSE, is have a whole bunch of both networking events so people within INSEAD get to know each other, as well as sort of talks and conferences where there's a little bit of sort of business and entrepreneurship. So we host one sort of annual conference in Bombay every year, which is 300-400 people, and another one in Bangalore, which is slightly smaller, 150 people, and very sort of prolific sort of speakers and industry veterans and domain sort of experts. We also do a lot of events in association with other schools, a lot with business schools. So I know we do a lot with HBS and Wharton, etc. But we've also sort of done stuff with LSE, and the Nirmala Kumar talk, for example, that was excellent. Sorry, I just had to do my little 2 cents for all the work I do.
One sort of emotion, takeaway, experience, impact that you left your European school with, something that you still carry with you to this day.
to me, again, sort of, it was, it was the personal growth bit. It was the ability to sort of challenge yourself, right? Go and sort of seek the unknown, play for the challenge, not the reward. Life will reward you if you sort of challenge yourself. That kind of sort of sentiment, I think to me was sort of most important. And I think seeing people around me who had taken these sort of chances, right? So we had people from very diverse backgrounds. I had a friend who sort of South African and had sort of moved to India to become an entrepreneur. We never lived in India before. Had come and run a business and sold it, and then was sort of doing INSEAD. And I think just seeing people around you who have the courage to do this and who've been successful and have learned and benefited from it so much, I think pushed me to sort of question, why was I doing this? What did I really want out of my life, both personally and professionally, and to really sort of seek that post my master's.
At Cambridge, we have what is called a global consulting project, and essentially it's a period of 5 or 6 weeks where you consult with an organization over the Easter break anywhere in the world. You could also be sitting in Cambridge if that's what your preference is, so you can literally go anywhere in the world. And I went to the West Bank for 5 or 6 weeks. And for me, that was a really, really profound and enriching experience. I think these days, we have access to what's going on in Ukraine or Thailand or anywhere at the click of a button. We can get sort of first-hand accounts, video footage, and so on and so forth, but it still is not the same as being there. And I don't think that, had it not been for Cambridge, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to go and stay for an extended period of time.
I think my takeaway was basically more related to the course content. Like I said, when I was thoroughly inspired by the idea of constructionism, that you can take something down and just break things you take for granted, like femininity and masculinity, and break it down to a set of rules. So I think it left me with a sense of hyper awareness about things that I now do. I'm more aware of things that I do, but it also left me with the greatest sense of confidence. You are far more willing to approach business houses. You're far more willing to step into the world. I mean, it just left me with the greatest sense of confidence. So,
what is the real world impact of your education? 10, 11 years of experience in finance, and you now have this new organization you've started up. Can you tell us about the organization, what you're trying to do, and how it's sort of the culmination of your years of experience, and what is it leading into?
So, what I do now is I sort of founded an advisory business. We essentially work with early stage companies and startups, and we work with a bunch of venture capital firms. And it's all sort of, has sort of come together sort of quite nicely, I think, in my career. So I started my career in investment banking. I was, in New York and at Goldman Sachs, and was working with a large number of private equity funds who were looking to invest, and I was sort of, would help sort of on the transaction side, M&A, debt and equity issuances, etc. I then moved on to private equity, which was in India, where we were investing in fast-growing companies, so putting significant money to work to help grow and expand businesses. And then I moved to venture capital, which was again a little bit more of the same, but slightly more early-stage companies. And part of all of that, what I realized was, while I was sort of interacting with companies and sort of advising companies and investing in companies, I never actually worked at a company. So I'm sitting, with CEOs and other sort of top management without enough of a perspective of how businesses run, like what is the reality sort of on the ground. And I just, one of the things I wanted to do was get a little bit closer to sort of helping kind of build businesses. So I'm quite passionate about working with people and helping build businesses, and I want to get a little closer to it. And so really this sort of, what we do now is we sort of partner with firms and help them sort of scale up. And so we work with a number of early stage companies, and we try and use some of our learnings and best practices from what we've learned working at larger organizations and with larger companies, and try and sort of put that into practice with smaller companies and early stage companies to help them sort of grow and scale. And it's incredibly sort of rewarding.
Rachita, you work in the development space before as well with the microfinance institution. As you're doing this with Godrej now, which is a bigger brand, obviously Godrej comes with a lot of resources. We all know that Godrej is a company or a corporate house that is actually truly focused on CSR. Despite these advantages, what are some of the key challenges you're facing in your role today?
Well, just since you brought up the microfinance organization, I was working in a very sort of hands-on, grassroots level microfinance organization. It was a good microfinance organization, not some of the more commercially minded ones. And I think, you realize how small your part is in actually making a dent in somebody else's life, how little you can do even though you put so much effort into it. But even still, when you're closer to the ground, you see the impact. One of the biggest challenges is when you move into a larger organization that isn't necessarily doing the work on the ground, but is maybe funding the work on the ground or partnering with organizations that are doing work on the ground. It's difficult to see what the impact of all your efforts and all your resources are. And Godrej is putting a lot of money and a lot of effort and time into, our CSR strategy is to train 1 million unemployed and underemployed youth by 2020. So that's a bit of a tall order. And we also focus on environmental sustainability. And we work through, cooperatives, government organizations, NGOs across the country. And we're putting so much money and effort into this. And sometimes you wonder, because the challenge isn't just that people don't have the skills. The challenge is also that they're not being connected to the right jobs, or the fact that they sit in rural areas and may be unwilling or unable to leave their farms and come to a city and kind of look for jobs there. So there are so many challenges and roadblocks. So even if you put all your resources and efforts towards addressing just one of them, you realize how little of an impact you end up making, because that ecosystem is not well built and it's not there. And that's, I would say, actually quite depressing.
Gayatri, tell us about the Big Sneeze. Very exciting, very fascinating. Please tell the audience what ghostwriting really means. I was very fascinated when I learned this. So
I was once at a party and somebody came up to me and says, so what do you do? I said, I'm a ghostwriter. He says, do you write about ghosts? I said, I don't write about ghosts. I have what I've recently been diagnosed as having a portfolio career. I do 5 things. The first thing that Big Sneeze does is that we write commission books. So if you're a doctor or an entrepreneur and your talent is being a doctor, it's not writing. My job is to write that book for you, sell it to a publisher, and therefore create a kind of a book that is readable, that has meaning, that is able to translate that vision and pass on the torch, as it were. The second thing that I do is I also do copywriting, which is your mainstream garden variety, short-term projects, be it brochures and websites. The third thing I do is I also mean my people that I was a partner with. I've started a service called Vobo. It's short for voice box. And what Vobo does is that we revamp the way corporates sound on their phone lines. So whether it's a Vodafone or whether it's an HDFC, these are not my clients, although HDFC is not my client, but if you call up an IVR like HDFC or whatever, you'll be greeted by a very electronic sounding, dial 1, dial 2. There's no real thought put into it, whether it's voiceover, whether it's music, whether it's scripting. I once came across an IVR where the client said, the voiceover said, you can log on to http://www. I said, it's 2 seconds. What are you doing? Somebody's not old. So we revamped the way companies sound on their phone lines. We also provide corporate caller tunes services, so I work with indie musicians to change that as well. And I do standard voiceovers. I've had 7 years of voiceover experience. I've also been a radio jockey with MTV. I also apart from working with MTV, I've also been a radio jockey with All India Radio. So that was before, of course, the privatization part. So I have, like I said, what sounds incredibly confused, but it's actually what has been diagnosed as, like I said, a portfolio career. And LSC has, like I said, I keep saying this, it really did and still does add a lot of credibility, especially when you're approaching new clients. So
how did you manage to put it all together to make your application really stand out? Any one thing you think that really stood out in your application that you'd like to share with everyone?
I think, look within yourself and see what's unique about you, right? Reflect on things. So for me, I think it was the fact that I'd lived in, 4 or 5 different sort of geographies, and, was able to therefore show sort of an adaptive sort of quality and open-mindedness. Maybe the woman on Wall Street, I think, worked. Honestly, I don't know, what sort of made it work, but I think the idea is look within you, try and sort of see why you're doing what you're doing. Think of the choices you've made in your life and why you've made it, and be able to sort of reflect and sort of articulate that sort of quite well. I think, particularly if you're doing the European schools, I think diversity is sort of really highly sort of valued. That's not to say if you haven't traveled a lot, or you haven't sort of lived in multiple countries, you shouldn't apply. But I think you have to fundamentally believe in sort of the experience and, you know, what you learn from living in different countries and assimilating different cultures. So a lot of people came to INSEAD and who hadn't sort of lived in any country but their home country, but then went on to sort of live and work in sort of other countries. I mean, it's that sort of other sort of famous quote, right? The world's a book, and if you haven't traveled, you've only read one page, right? So I think sort of INSEAD really sort of believes it. So bring in as much as sort of diversity as you can. Entrepreneurship is another one that INSEAD sort of values quite highly if you're applying there. And other than that, just you just try and find what makes you unique, and think about why you're doing what you're doing.
Actually, I don't know what I did on my application to make it stand out. I think I was just honest. I just, spoke from the heart. Squash had been a big part of my life, and I think has played a huge role in shaping how I approach so many things in my life: success, failure, work, play, anything. So I definitely talked about squash. I talked about my interest in social and economic development a lot, and sort of applying sort of business skills to development challenges. And I just told them why I wanted to go to Cambridge.
I think when I was writing out my application, I kind of had a feeling that this is going to be a substitute for myself. In these words, they'll have to pretty much think that I'm sitting there and speaking to them. So it's very important for me to make it come alive. I mean, it's obviously that you need to have a convincing argument. You need to be persuasive. You need to say why you're suited for the course. But you also need to, at least I felt that I needed to make it almost so real that you could actually come out and touch me in that sense.
Who did you reach out to for help? What kind of assistance, if any, did you get?
I mean, I think it's really important to seek, guidance and advice. I'm not saying this, this is not like a shameless plug for guidance counseling, but to me, honestly, once you've worked for a few years, you say, how hard is it to write 6-7 essays? This is about you. And I think I had a really sort of great guidance counselor who was able to take my essays and really sort of turn it around and say, hang on, you're not answering the question at all. Or, why, what are you doing what you've done? So I'd say, seek advice from professionals, talk to your friends, talk to alumni. So I spoke to a bunch of friends who had gone to INSEAD and LBS, and I think they give you a great sort of unique perspective, both into the school and what the school is about, and it helps you sort of understand the right fit and what is the right sort of school for you as well. I think that's it.
My sister's an editor. This is what she does. She works at Al Jazeera in New York, and so she was basically my guide. I would sort of write essays and send them across, and she would edit them for me and help me with that a lot, which was huge. I didn't actually end up going to a guidance counselor because I ended up only applying to Cambridge actually, and I was a bit I procrastinated, so I was a bit late on the deadline. So I just used my sister's help, and of course I talked to a lot of friends who had been to B school and shared their experiences as well.
For my application essay, I agonized and agonized over every word. It took me 5 weeks to write 1,000 words. 5 weeks of redrafts, drafts, finding some uncle who did something and finding somebody and showing it to like 4,000 people. I had the help, I must mention, apart from my family who provided invaluable advice and support, my parents and my brother. I also had a lot of help from Dr. Pruthi, who was an economist, who helped me kind of, step away from the work and said, okay, this is what you should be doing, this is what you shouldn't be doing, etc., etc. But it was, literally still is, one of the hardest things I've done is to find a good, credible application essay. So to build that, like I said, to make people think that you're sitting there and convincing them, that was the hardest for me.
A final word of advice for everyone in the room, just anything you'd like to share.
They say you can never sort of be overeducated. So I'd say, it's because at least for me, it was sort of this big question, do you sort of need a master's? I'm so glad I went and got it. It really is an investment in yourself, so I'd say sort of go out there. It's a great, time to take a year off, just have fun, enjoy, do all the stuff you wanted to do in undergrad, but just, either too focused in undergrad or, weren't sort of mature enough to make the most of it. Find something that's a right fit. It's about enjoying yourself. It's not just about the degree and, what it's on your resume. Go out there, find something that's a fit, talk to people, have fun, both in writing and your application as well as sort of once you're there. And I think that's it.
I would just say don't overthink it. With sort of GMAT scores, and you can go online these days and find so many websites that will compare, like Poets and Quants will compare every business school to other business schools, the pros and the cons and how you can apply, and there's so much information out there that can actually be overwhelming. And I think that's why actually a guidance counselor can give you a lot of clarity. But yeah, don't be overwhelmed, don't overthink it, just go with the flow, it'll work out.
I would say you have this chance as a student to go there. All you will be doing, although it's very intensive, you will be learning, because when you're working, you don't have the time. It would be great if you could use that time to absorb as much as possible. Absorb not only your course content or what you have to do, but absorb what's not written, what's around you, what's the campus, the ability to travel. It's very important to absorb that, because you soon will not be able to do that when you are back at work.
I had a question about the 1 year MBA or course versus the 2 year US experience. Like academically, how did you think it was? Was it very overwhelming? And were you able to assimilate the course content as well as have a lot of fun? How was it?
You cover 80% of the course in 10 months, what most people would do in 2 years. So it is incredibly intense. It is an accelerated program. So you don't quite sort of miss out on sort of an MBA thing. But I think it takes a certain kind of person and a certain kind of work experience to make it work. So INSEAD's average age is about 28, 29, it varies, and that's deliberately sort of done because, if you haven't spent 6 or 7 years working, it's going to be hard for you to keep up with the pace of the workload. And it also sort of depends on what kind of experience. So if you're looking to switch careers, so if you're a lawyer and you're looking to get into business, maybe a 2 year, and I had a friend who sort of did this. He struggled because literally the day you come in, you're job hunting and job seeking. There's very little time to make a very drastic career switch. So I think if you're doing something as drastic as going from law to I want to do something in business and I don't know what it is, a 2 year course sort of might be beneficial. If you come in fairly sure that I want to do something, you have a couple of months to talk to people, understand what different careers are, and then sort of pursue it. But I think, so it depends, what you've come in looking for, what you're looking to do outside, what sort of experience you've had. And some people, just, prefer a slow pace. Honestly, I think if you ask anyone from INSEAD, the one sentiment they left it with, I think unanimously people will tell you it was too short and it was bittersweet. It's a great, I think, experience. If you can, we wish it was 2 years because it was just so much fun and it was such a great experience. If you can afford 2 years, both sort of monetarily as well as sort of personally, maybe that's better for you.
That's actually a great point about it. I think about it, that 1 year flying by, and that's something to think about, whether you will be happy with sort of a 1 year, because it literally, the minute you walk on campus, you're barely into classes a week and 2 weeks, and you kind of already start looking for jobs, and you feel like you've just left your last job and you're already job hunting. So that's, and that's something that kicks in very early. With a 2 year program, you have a little more leeway. And I think career switch or not, in any case, you are competing with your colleagues at the MBA looking for these jobs, and that's certainly something to think about, because you feel like you have less time to do it. I didn't have any financial background experience or any of that, and it was certainly challenging. Things were moving very, very quickly, but you have 200 other people, 150 people going through the same thing as well. And of course you have the guys who come from hardcore finance and know the stuff, or maybe I know you're from the financial field, but even marketing or other areas as well. But as long as you go in knowing that that's what you're getting into, you kind of, I feel like you figure it out, you know.
The only thing to add to that also is INSEAD has 2 intakes, one in Jan, one in August. And the one that starts in Jan has an internship break. So at least, so if you're not very clear about what you want to do and you want a little bit of thing, you have an opportunity to do an internship and sort of test it out.
A lot of people feel that one-year programs have more breadth and less depth, and this is something that I've heard for quite a while. At least where my master's was concerned, it was as intense as I wanted to make it. So like I said, the course content was deceptively light, so the depth was up to me. So that's something that is student-specific in a lot of cases.
I would advise you, if you actually have that window, just take the time off. Don't prep for your MBA. You don't need to do it. Just go there, and nobody does it. I mean, they send you stuff to read. Actually, I shouldn't say nobody does it, but I didn't do it. I didn't prep for it. And yeah, you rarely have a window of a month or 2 months where you know what your next step is going to be, and for sure, and you have this canvas to just do stuff that you don't otherwise get to do. And these days we spend we're always trying to catch up with time. You're always running from one thing to the other. I would really cherish that. I wish I had been more organized.
So I got into Wharton round 1, so I knew Wharton was an option. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to go somewhere. So I'm going to do what Rachita recommended. I have this canvas of time. So when I heard about HPS, I was in Kerala doing my teacher's training course in yoga. I was at an ashram when I got the call from HPS. But I had also signed up to do my CFA level 1 in June because I was going to Wharton, and I was like, okay, I better be at par with these financial skills because everyone comes in at a pretty high level. And as they all mentioned, when you go there, there's so much going on that I didn't want to be struggling with basic finance concepts. So things I could do over the summer, I just wanted to make sure, and it really eased my first semester at school. Because I mean, I'd already just studied everything fresh for my June CFA. So by September, I knew most of the content. So it allowed my transition into school to be much, much simpler. So I propose a balanced approach, like do something crazy and fun, and then also just make sure you prep your basics so that when you get to school, it's much easier.
Yeah, it's one of those sort of big questions people worry about a lot at INSEAD. So 80% of the people at INSEAD spend time on both campuses. And I think the only reason the 20% don't is because, say those who have lived in Singapore for a few years before say, we don't want to come back here, we'll spend all our time in France. Or those who've spent time in France say, we'll only sort of do Singapore. But other than that, everybody spends time on both campuses. And really the sort of logic is the 2 campuses are, they do a really good job. They're identical. So you can take the same courses that are offered in France are also offered in Singapore, identical courses. So it doesn't sort of affect your learning in any way. The clubs are the same, the level of professors, of course, is the same. So they're identical in that way. But each campus and each country obviously has its own culture. And I think to miss one of them, would sort of really be sort of a pity. So France, you're in this little town 45 minutes away from Paris. You have chateaus, and people live in chateaus, and there's, wine, and there are lovely chateau parties, and, the campus is a little larger, and that's what sort of INSEAD started. Singapore is completely different. It's Asia, and of course the travel in both is also quite different. It's Asia. It's a hub of thing. A lot of people think, particularly those who are Europeans, call it Asia Light. It gives you exposure to Asia. If you're looking for a job, I think in Asia a lot of people prefer to finish off in Singapore just because you have more access to network. So companies that come on campus are not allowed to the school doesn't tell you if the person is in France or Singapore. So if somebody is officially coming and officially applying on any of the job boards or coming on campus, there's no difference at all. The only thing it might help is if you're doing your personal networking and you're looking in Asia, it might help to just be in Singapore. But I'd strongly sort of suggest to spend time on both campuses because it really is a big part of being INSEAD. So again, like I said, schools can't distinguish between the two. So if a BCG comes and posts a job posting in London, the same job posting will be in Singapore and the same one will be in in France. The BCG sort of say final rounds, the recruiters might come on campus, in which case you may not, those in France might have a one-on-one FaceTime thing, whereas I don't think this applies for BCG because they obviously have a Singapore office, but should it be another company that only has a Europe office, you may have to do a video conference call versus a face-to-face call. So that's the only difference. So there's that slight sort of, this is recruiting, right? So for the slight advantage that a face-to-face versus a video conference might help you, people prefer, if you're looking for Europe placement, people prefer to finish in Fontainebleau, and I think if you prefer to be in Asia, then people prefer to be in Singapore. But it really doesn't make a big difference.
Okay, thank you all for being here. Thank you so much to the panelists for bringing this diversity from finance, entrepreneurship, development, and then media with your portfolio of skills and things the company offers. Thank you all for being here. I've known all of you personally for very long, but truly I've learned a lot about you from just this last 45 minutes. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to the audience, and the panelists will be around for some time if you'd like to chat with them. Thank you.